everybody. You are listening to the Heroic Mindset Podcast. My name is Dr. Tom Davis, and I'm here with Larry Sunderland. And today, we're going to be tackling the whole idea of mindset, of course, but from a different perspective. We're going to be looking at what does it take to create a winning mindset in the life of a high-performance coach. Because coaches who are really excelling at a level that it's at a very, very high level, they're doing something different than everybody else. They're thinking differently. They're approaching the game differently. They have different talks in the locker room than other coaches do. And so, as all of you know who've been listening to us, we're really, really concerned and interested in what does it take to create the kind of mindset that helps you succeed on the field, but also to succeed in life. And I think that's exactly what we're going to be talking about today. And you're going to hear some great stories from some fantastic coaches around the world. Larry, before we jump into that, finally we're starting to get some changes here happening. I mean, we actually are able to watch the Bundesliga now, at least. It's an empty stadium, but it's something to watch. Is what's happening with MLS? Is there anything that you can kind of let us in on? Any secrets that are happening that we could get excited about?
Sure, Tom. It's life is beginning to come back, and as life comes back, football comes back too. I don't know which one
goes hand in hand, right?
Yeah, I don't know if one leads the other sometimes, but it's awful good to be able to at least watch football on TV now, like you mentioned, the Bundesliga. But here in the States, MLS is coming back. July 8th, they've announced that July 8th there will be a mini kind of World Cup type tournament with all the MLS teams down in Orlando at Disney. So they'll be at the Wide World of Sport. All the teams will be together in the same hotel. So it'll be, a quarantine fashion, kind of the new way of doing things here.
Hopefully so not for very long. It's the new way, but hopefully it doesn't last long.
We'll get back. But it'll be really interesting. It'll be a World Cup type tournament. There'll be a kind of a qualifying round, and then there'll be knockout rounds. The eventual champion of the tournament will qualify for the CONCACAF Champions League. So that'll be great. And these games also count towards the regular season. So once the teams get back to Orlando, they'll get into some form of a regular season routine. So, so a lot of meeting to what's going on down there. And it's a very hot time to be in Orlando, I guess.
Boy, I bet. Yeah, they'll have to have the sprayers out for sure and lots of water breaks. Do you know if it's going to be televised? Is that something that everybody will be able to watch?
I'm hoping there'll be some type of streaming. I don't really have information on that, but I'd have to think there'd be some method to stream the games at the very least.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm sure that everyone's really excited for that to get going. And I mean, over here in Europe, it's a little different scenario because we have relegation in effect for some teams, and it's created all kinds of scenarios and arguments and potential threats of lawsuits. And I mean, who knows? Because of course it's a big deal over here. If you're relegated, then you are in a much different position than if you're in La Liga. Segunda A, they're fighting to get back, and now this has thrown it all off. But yeah, for those of you who can watch La Liga, it starts here in just another day or two, I believe.
Yeah, with some big games.
Some very big games, some very big games. So yeah, I think also it'll help people feel like life is returned. Things are getting back to normal again because sport is such an important part of life.
Absolutely.
Well, let's jump into this. And of course, I want to take a look at some coaches that I admire, that I know you admire, and also jumping into your brain a bit about how this fits in your world and what you've been able to learn over the years about the mindset of a coach. And again, I think that whether you're talking about CEOs that I work with a lot, or coaches in these different leagues, or even players, they that are at the highest level, they do have a completely different mindset than the rest, right? I mean, this is the idea that if you're going to get the results that the top 3% of coaches in the world are getting, then you're going to have to do what the top 3% of coaches in the world are doing. And that's really the differentiation is that most people aren't doing what they're doing. So today we want to dig into what are they doing that seems to be so different than what everybody else is doing. And so I thought we could jump in since we're talking about leagues starting up. I think one of the coaches that comes to people's mind as being incredibly successful is Pep Guardiola. Of course, here in Barcelona, he's very, very famous. And now, of course, with Manchester City, what he's been able to do there. But one of the things that people may or may not know about Pep is that he was really focused on winning cultures. Like we talked about that. We dedicated an episode to culture and to creating a trust-based culture. And again, many people had asked for the PDF that we created out of that, how to create a real growth mindset culture that's based on trust. And we're still happy to send that out to you if you want to email us at info@theheroicmindset.com. But Pep was really big into this. Winning culture was a big thing for him. And one of the number one things you read about, and that if you hear about people that know him, I mean, here, his brother-in-law is part owner in Girona. So, people are always talking about his mindset and what Pep was doing. But that is what he focused on, the culture of the club. And you've talked about that, Larry, that it's something that is paramount. You can't skip out on this. Culture is one of the most important things you could ever establish as a coach.
Yeah, and it's very interesting because it was so important for Pep. And if you look at his courage, right? 37-year-old, he's managing Barca B, and he gets appointed first team manager. Not really a well-known manager, taking over a team that is, talk about pressure. In Catalonia, I mean, Tom, you're there. You know what pressure is on Barcelona, right?
Yeah, it is the culture.
Yeah. So this 37-year-old with a limited amount of coaching experience takes over the first team. And what's the first thing he does? He gets rid of the 3 stars. He gets rid of Deco. He gets rid of Ronaldinho, and he gets rid of Eto'o. And he established his cultural norms immediately. Right? Of nothing is more important than the team, hard work, right? The idea of humility. So those were his 3 core values that he brought to that team. And in replacing the 3 stars, and I don't know personally, but maybe their egos had grown as their stardom grew. He replaced those 3 stars with 3 players that came through La Masia, that came through the culture that is bred at Barcelona. So we brought in Iniesta, Xavi, and Messi, along with Piqué, 4 players. And those were his 4 culture gurus on the field.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. First of all, he drew the line in the sand. That you're exactly right. I mean, what a big thing. That's a big move. And, we've talked about in our last podcast about this whole idea of the different motivational climates. And the one that you really don't want is this ego-driven climate. Mm-hmm. And I think that is fascinating that, one of the first things that he does is tries to remove that ego-driven climate. I mean, that's exactly what he was saying. He was saying, we're not going to be about the superstar. We're not going to be about the one man who is the one that carries everything and is the ego-driven athlete. We're going to be about team. And so I think it's fascinating that when you come into a culture like that, at that high of a level. Now, of course, at that point, nobody knew Barcelona like they know it now. I mean, he really made FC Barcelona mega famous with his coaching style. And then, of course, bringing in Iniesta and Messi and all of them. But that one of the first things he focuses on that you hit on, those 3 areas, not that the first is humility. I mean, This doesn't seem very high performance.
Correct.
On the surface.
Right.
But in truth, it is very high performance is what you're saying.
Yeah. And if you look at that idea of humility, how it connects to Pep's way of playing, it is a collective way of playing, right? No player is more important than the team. So you have to have that humility. You have to have that we don't want to say ego-less because ego plays a part, but we like to say, I think, Tom, we like to say quiet ego, right?
Sure. We all have ego to some extent.
We all have ego, and it does play a part in motivation, but it's how you quiet that ego and use it properly, right? But Pep, like you said, he drew a line in the sand. And one thing you know about Pep, he believes what he believes, right? And this is something you see in the elite level coaches, right, that they have a great deal of belief in themselves. When Pep went to Man City, I remember his first year, things were slow, evolving the way he wanted them to evolve. And there were questions from the media about his way of playing, his way of doing things. Can it work in the EPL?
Right.
And Pep said, I believe it can work, but you know what? If it doesn't, I will leave. So he wasn't going to change. He wasn't going to adapt. He
had a clear vision of what he wanted to accomplish.
Okay, so then we start to go back to this mindset of the very elite coaches, and one of the first things they do is they know who they are.
Yeah, right.
Nope.
Yeah, that's like that athlete's triangle, right?
Yeah.
That we've talked about and put together. That it's all of the hard work, and hard work was the second thing, right? So it's not to eliminate hard work from the equation at all. But if you are going to rise to the top, if you're going to have more frequent peak performances, right? If you're going to enter that flow state more often, then you're going to have to know who you are and why you do what you do. Those are the deeper questions. And it triggered, it's funny when you said that, when we have been at the training grounds of La Masia and seen them train, and we've played against them. I mean, my son's team's played against them many times, is you still see that style there, right? I mean, they train it even from the youth level. The youngest kids, Ben Hameen, that's where the passing comes from. That's the possession soccer. It's not just about you. And we watched even sometimes some superstar kids who want to dribble and really, kind of take it on all their shoulders, that the coaches train that out of them, actually reinforcing this idea, I think, that Pep put in place.
The idea of the collective is most important. And I think, Klopp has spoken about this, that oftentimes young players coming through believe it's about the individual, and it's about the individual making a difference and the individual being the star. And what Klopp says is, unfortunately, when you get to the highest level, there are very, very, very few. He says there are 3 or 4, and we know the 3 or 4. Right? The Ronaldos and the Messis. And so he says there are 3 or 4. So he says everybody else must be dedicated to the team.
Wow. Yeah, I found this quote from Pep. He said, your talent will get you as far as the dressing room. How you behave determines if you will stay here. I thought that was fantastic. So here's this idea of behavior, that it's not just what you do, but it's how you behave. It's how you treat people. It has to do with, are you kind? Are you helping other people along? Are you developing something in the lives of other people that's different? It's not just about you. This is the third component that you had mentioned. So we have humility, hard work, and this I'd read that this came from Cruyff, right? I mean, but he took those teachings, but this was his interpretation. And the third was putting the team above your self-interests. Right? Not that you don't have self-interests, but you are about something bigger than yourself now.
And those self-interests have to align with the team's interests.
Right. So the other thing I found that was really interesting is that he believed in this so much that he had an assistant coach named Manel Estiarte, and it was his sole job to observe and to reinforce this culture and these behaviors all the time. I mean, that's how committed he was to it. It wasn't just something he talked about in the locker room. He actually had someone appointed to make sure that this culture was instilled as soon as they walked in, throughout the training, throughout the games, and when they walked out the door.
Yeah, and they also had a saying, FIFO, fit in or find a way out.
Oh, is that?
Yeah, so if you were caught behaving badly or sulking or making yourself more important than the team, it was FIFO. Fit in or find a way out.
Fit in or find a way out. Wow. Yeah. I found a research study. I got to throw a research study in here. We've talked about the trust-based one, but this one had to do with performance. Okay. And I know a lot of people listening to us, it's about performance. We've talked about that you have to win games, right? With all that Klopp and Pep were coming in. I mean, yes, now you look at them and go, oh, how they're geniuses, right? I mean, now we can learn from the culture that they've established. But if it didn't work and they didn't win games, you may not know who they are. Exactly. But this research study talked about that culture has a 22% impact on performance. And I was wondering if you could talk about that a little bit, because I think, if we talk about trust-based teams outperforming non-trust-based teams, that's one thing. But when you're talking about performance, so you're telling me that if I can establish the right kind of culture, which of course means that I'm establishing the right kind of mindset. First, it starts with me as the coach. My mindset has to be in the right place. I have to have a growth mindset. And then I'm helping to establish that mindset in the lives of the players, that if you can impact 22% better performance, that's a massive advantage on the field. I'm wondering how you've seen this. Have you seen that play out where you've got cultures that are they're higher performing because of some of these things we're talking about, and they're able to play better. Doesn't mean they don't win they're not going to win all the time. It's not that they're not going to have defeat, but I'm wondering how you'd interact with that research statistic.
Well, it's interesting. You bring it back to culture, and you brought it back to trust a bit, right? And my interactions with high-level players, when you ask them who is their favorite coach, who had the greatest impact on your performance, Tom, I can't off the top of my head think of a player that said that recognized the coach because of his tactical prowess, right? They didn't, he was able to, we inverted this and we did this and what? No, it wasn't. No one recognized that. They all recognized the human side. They all recognized, well, you know what? He knew my child was sick. And when he came into the locker room every day, the first question he asked me was, how is your daughter? How's she feeling? How's she doing?
Wow.
It was stories like that, right? And now if you take that a step further, and we can talk about this with Klopp, why is my individual performance better? Why does my team performance become better? It's because of connections, right? It's yes, you can talk about the soccer connections on the field, like we talked about the way Pep plays in the collective, but it's a microcosm of life. It's the connections between people that make us want to perform better for one another. And I think this is what you find with all. It could be, I don't know, maybe we have to study this more, but it could be the foundation of all really high performing teams, regardless of era. Because I think about Vince Lombardi, totally different way of coaching, right? Totally different way of coaching than maybe Pep. But there was a connection between Vince Lombardi and his players of that era that they wanted to play for him. They would do anything they could for him, and as a result of that, for each other.
Yeah, that's where you get these phrases that we all hear about quite often, like people don't care about how much you know until they know how much you care. And we think, oh, that just seems kind of fluffy and, maybe soft a bit. But what you're saying is that when we're talking about a culture that's impacting performance, this is exactly what these kinds of coaches do. Go ahead.
And I was going to say, where that intersects with talent, you have the equation, right? There's the equation. Because I've been in cultures that we've tried to establish wonderful cultures. Okay, I worked with a coach, Carlos de los Cobos. I was one of his assistants. Wonderful man. People will question the coaching, because the results didn't come in the end. But a wonderful man tried to establish a fantastic culture within the team. And one of the
Where was
things,
this? Which team was this?
this is when I was with Chicago.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And what was interesting, he came in for the preseason, and I try to observe as much as I can, and I observed him and his observation of the players. So every day I witnessed him just watching players, and you could almost see him making mental notes. And one day we spoke, and the team would have meals together every day, and he and I became quite good friends as people. And he said to me, one of the things we must do is we must make contact with the player every day. And he actually meant touch. So at every meal, he would go around and he would put a hand on every player's shoulder and just ask them how they're doing, how they're feeling, how's their family back home, anything new, anything you want to talk about. But he made a point to have this human touch. It was very, very important to him.
It was genuine. And now, it sounded like, everyone knew. Yeah.
And he meant it, and he cared. And so now we go back to this intersection of this culture and talent, right? He was beginning to build this culture, but there was not the intersection of talent, let's say. Mm-hmm. So the team was not successful. So this, everything's an experiment. Klopp's running an experiment. Pep is running an experiment. This experiment in Chicago didn't work out, but it wasn't because we weren't trying to build the right culture. We just didn't, Rennie said something great, right? He said, we never lose, we just run out of time. Well, in Chicago, maybe we didn't lose, we just ran out of time.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And I think you're bringing up a really important point. It doesn't mean it's foolproof, right? It doesn't mean it works 100% of the time. But I think percentage wise, you see, and we're going to jump in and talk about Klopp and a couple other coaches, that we certainly see that it works a lot more time than it doesn't, right? If you want to try to guarantee you have a healthy culture that's built on growth mindset principles, where people are more about the team than they are themselves, that it's this environment where it's not fear-based, right? But people are taking risk and they rise to a different level. It's because of these things, right? They know they're believed in. They know that they're cared for. And that's what, athletes are human beings, right? That's what we all want more than anything. It's like, man, do you care about me? Do I, if you look at, back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is a big thing that I really love and really teach a lot on, that we all know that, the base needs, food, clothing, shelter, self-esteem, all these things that we need. But at the top, which is the self-actualization piece, is that the definition of that need is that whether I realize it or not, every single person on the planet wakes up in the morning, looks in the mirror, and asks themselves a question: do I matter? You and I are asking that question whether we realize it or not. Everyone listening to this show is answering that question. Now, it's a subconscious question for most people, but these athletes are asking that question: do I matter? And when you just describe what that coach did, who walks around and tells them how important they are and asks about their family and even the bench players, right? Because we heard that last week too from Rennie, that Sir Alex Ferguson, that he went around to everyone. He didn't look at the player who was performing the best right during that time of the season any differently than he did the person who was last on the bench.
Yes.
And so maybe that is part of the secret sauce, is that when people are believed in like that and they're told they matter because of this kind of a culture, it can almost cause them to perform at a much higher level than they even thought they could perform at.
I agree with everything you just said. I think it's so important. And, a second ago we were talking about the outcome, right? At a certain level, obviously for Barcelona and for Liverpool, they have to win, mm-hmm. right? But so many of our coaches and people listening to our show are player developers, right? We don't work at that level that Klopp is working at or Pep is working at. So think about what that affords us as we talk about this intersection of culture and talent. As a player developer, if we can create this culture, mm-hmm. think about how much easier that makes it for us to develop that talent. to make that talent come through, because we don't have the pressure of, all right, we don't lose, we just run out of time. Well, player developers have a lot more time, right? So if we establish this culture and then we begin to work on the development of this talent, wow, what a
combo.
Oh, what a great combo.
All right, so I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit here with a question. Because for people who are sitting there asking, because I'd like you to talk a little bit about, if you could describe the culture of what FC Cincinnati looks like. Okay, so if I'm listening to this and I'm like, okay, I'm hearing this, but what does this culture look like? I mean, okay, it looks like what we described with Pep: humility, hard work, putting the team above yourself. You know, these kinds of phrases that we're talking about, like instilling the right behavior in the players and getting them to think, hey, it's not about you, it's about the team, right? You got to have these higher purposes for what you got to know who you are. But like, what would that look like? Could you describe a little bit about what would the culture of FC Cincinnati look like? How would players come into that and absorb that culture? How is that? Like, give us a real life example from your perspective.
I'll give you some pictures maybe from the academy, right?
Perfect.
And I may jump around as things come into my mind.
Mm-hmm.
First, something we stole from the All Blacks. Everyone sweeps the shed.
Nice.
So one of the things, we have a full-time equipment man, right? And in many clubs, whether it's pro, academy, in many clubs, that equipment man is running around and, you know, getting the cones, collecting the balls. You know, at FC Cincinnati, the players are serving the equipment man.
Everyone. Captains.
Everyone. Coaches. Captains, and we can talk about captains. We're a little bit different with that, but everyone, right? When you walk into our locker rooms, we initially the coaches would assign 5 players for each week to clean the locker room, and I said, I spoke with the coaches about it, and I said, I don't like that. I'm sorry, it shouldn't be assigned. It should be because they want to serve. And we spoke about that as a group. And I can tell you, our locker rooms are spotless. They are always taken care of. So you see those things. You see people showing gratitude, just thanking people for things. Our athletic trainer, thanking them, right? It's important that the players are doing that all the time. We have a lot of great banter, right? There's a lot of great banter, and people don't take things personally, right? They understand it's part of being the group, and that if I can joke with you and we can make light of one another, we're connected, right? It doesn't affect us. As a leader, I in my role, I can tell you, just the other day, I sent an email out to our entire staff, just first off, thanking them for how hard they've worked as we've gone through this crisis, because it's been different for them. It's been a different type of work. So I wanted to thank them because they've been working so hard at that. I wanted to let them know that I feel for them not being on the field. So I shared that with them. And then I asked them how I could be a better leader. You know, are there things I'm neglecting? What types of things? What recommendations? And finally, I finished it off with, what can I do for you? What can I do for you? What aspirations do you have? Shoot for the moon. Let me know what you want. I don't want you to think I've been neglecting you through this time. So I got great feedback from the guys on that as well. So we try to, those are just examples of some of the things that we do. If you were to come and take a picture.
Yeah. You know, you mentioned one very interesting one that I think is incredibly important that most people don't even think about doing. And that's asking for feedback. So the Leadership Challenge, it's a great leadership book. It's mostly about corporate leadership, but it's 30 years of research. Jim Kouzes and Barry Posner, I've worked with them. I'm certified in Leadership Challenge. I really love their work. But they've created a set of behaviors, there's 30 of them, that they have noticed over the course of these 30 years that some of the best leaders in the world exhibit on a regular basis. And one of them, which, by the way, when you give a 360 eval, so a 360 eval is you score yourself on these behaviors and then other people score you, right? But it's traditionally the one that's really important, but it's at the bottom every single time, is asks for feedback about how your behavior affects other people's performance.
Yeah.
And I think, like, for me, I'll be honest, like, it just doesn't occur to me. I'm so visionary. I'm running out. I don't even think about that. But that is one of the key characteristics of great leadership, is that you say, hey, give me some feedback on my coaching. Give me some feedback on how I'm interacting. Now, not maybe like after a scenario that got inflamed and maybe you said something that was too harsh. You probably don't want, after a while, but to make that part of the culture, I think it communicates these things that you're talking about. It communicates that we're walking humility, right? That it's not about me, even though I'm the coach here. It's about the team, that we're in this together. I mean, that just doing that communicates a whole thing about culture.
Yeah, and it needs to be authentic. It needs to be genuine, right?
You can't read it off a piece of paper.
Can't read it off a piece of paper, and it has to be about how you can become better at serving others.
Right.
Right. So that's I'm trying to figure out how I can become a better leader by getting feedback from them. Now, and part of the authentic piece, I think it's the modern world. Everybody is so busy, right?
Mm-hmm.
But part of being authentic about it is communicating that. So I asked for that feedback, and my week just blew up. So I had these emails sitting from my group, my team, in my inbox, and I hadn't responded to them in a week. So I was like, I saw it yesterday, and I was like, oh man. So I just sent an email back to him saying, guys, I haven't forgotten this. My week blew up. It's on my mind, and I'm gonna get back to you with it. That's important.
Just being authentic.
Yeah, hey, we're all busy sometimes,
right?
And you know what's funny sometimes too, that the idea coaches feel like we always have to have the answer, and we don't.
Right.
So why fake it?
Yeah.
Why not? I don't know, but I'm going to try to figure this out. Yeah. Right, and I'll get back to you. Or I don't know what. So when you hear Klopp, he talks about questions. Asks a lot of questions. When a player asks me a question, I don't know. What do you think? How would you solve it?
Right.
How would you answer the question?
Throwing it back at them.
Yeah. Let's think about how we can figure this out together.
Right.
I mean, we had Steve on last week, and Steve's a master at this. When Steve and I will talk, and he will ask me why, and I know this. He will ask me why 3 times. He says, I can get to the bottom of anything you have on your mind with three whys. And it's so funny,
Yeah, you answer the question and then you ask why, and then you answer that question and then you ask why again. That's how that works.
Yes. Yeah.
So how many years did it take you, Larry, to learn this whole idea about asking for feedback as a coach, as a player developer? I mean, that's not something that you come out of the gate thinking about or doing. Like, there must have been something that happened in your life where you learned the power of that.
Yeah, I think the answer is 56. I'm 56 years old. It's taken me 56 years. I'm still learning. I think there are a lot of moments in your life where you look back and you go, okay, that was transformational for me. And there was one moment for me. Boy, was it? I think it was 2010. I was coaching. Was coaching with the Fire Academy. We were in the playoffs. This was the under 16s at the time. We were in the playoffs. We were in a very, very heated match. We had been in complete control of the match, and it was one of those that was like, you could feel it. It was slipping away.
That's soccer for you.
Yeah. The wave was starting to crash over here a little bit, and the game was slipping away, and I was getting, the French call it, getting tossed in the washing machine. And I was in the washing machine. I was right in the heart of the washing machine. I mean, I was playing the game, I was sweating. I was every play I was involved with. Every player, I was telling them what to do. I was screaming at the refs. We went down.
You were controlling the whole thing.
Yeah, man, it was me. I was playing the game, and And if we could win it, I was going to win it. Let me tell you.
Mm-hmm.
And we went down and we went into overtime and we ended up winning the game. So, I'm patting myself on the back and as I'm on the sideline, I'm watching, and there's always some of like mentor coaches around, right? And one of my mentors, Bob Gansler, coached the '90 World Cup team, and he's one of the leading coaches in the U.S. and his coaching tree is extensive. He was watching the game, and man, I turned around and I saw the look on his face. He didn't have to say anything, but I knew I had let him down.
And you were patting yourself on the back, right, when you looked over at him?
Man, when I looked over, it was one of these things, if I was a dog, the tail was between my legs, and I just wanted to get off that field quick, And I had other coaches coming over to me and like congratulating me, and I kind of, I did the big long walk of shame around coach and didn't go over to him and stuff, and yeah, that was a moment in my life where I was like, that's not how I want to be. And it certainly didn't change overnight, but I think the fact that, here we are, quite a bit down the road, and I'm quite a bit older, and I still look back at that and I still feel really bad about that.
Right.
And by the way, that team won the national championship.
Wow.
But it was not because of that. And it was not because of me. And it was definitely the wrong approach.
Yeah. Well, and that ties into this, what Pep talks about, humility, right? And that was a humbling experience, but you had to be open and you had to receive it. I mean, one of the things that we always learn about leaders that I always read in books or you hear people talk about is that leaders are learners. Like some of the people that I've coached who run huge companies, I mean, massive companies, they're people who learn more than almost anybody else that I know. Right? They don't get to this point where they say I've arrived because I'm the CEO of this multi-billion international company. No, they want to learn more. They're constant sponges. I mean, you hear this about Bill Gates, that he's created a system where he can read more and more books every year. This constant learning. Leaders are learning, and I think coaches certainly, even if you had a lot of success at that moment, you might have had a way to say, why should I listen to him? He's older than me. I've just won this game. I've learned all these things, but you didn't do that. You did.
Well, isn't that the scariest part of it, though, Tom? And I think this is where the coaches fall into the trap, right? And you say it all the time: behaviors that are reinforced.
Yeah, the behavior that gets rewarded gets repeated.
Yeah. So, sorry, I didn't quote you right there.
No, that was it. That was it. You got it.
But that's it. I mean, that is it. I could have very easily walked away from that thinking, yeah, that's good coaching. And thank God, coach was there like a father figure, right? And I looked at him and I was like, letting you down, and it was so funny. I think all of us with our dads and stuff like that, you could read an expression in your dad's face when you knew you let him down. Like my dad would roll his tongue like behind his bottom lip. So when his tongue went in, I knew, oh man, I did something bad, So it kind of reminded me of that,
Yeah. And that, it kind of triggers for me this idea, and it did have something to do with what I read about Klopp, that we're going to jump into here. But is a lot of what you're talking about, this deep relationship is about this fathering aspect in a sense, right? Which again, you're not going to think about, normally think these high performance coaches, they think about fathering. But yeah, I mean, if you look at Jurgen Klopp, he likens his role to that of a father. And so, you even said something to me. I remember, we're gonna have Jesse Marsh hopefully on the show here pretty quick, and you told a story that really kind of set the picture of this. But for those people who don't know who he is, Larry, can you give us a little background, because he's, I think, envied in a good way by many people around the world, many coaches, but he's in a unique position and he's doing what no other American coach is doing right now.
Yeah. Jesse's currently the head coach at Salzburg in the Austrian First Division. And he's having a fantastic year. search it up a little bit, how well he's doing. He's having a fantastic year. He's had Champions League experience and he coached against Klopp. So he's doing stuff that Americans have not done, but I think it's really important that people also understand where Jesse came from. A small town in Wisconsin, became a great player in his own right in MLS and with national teams. Coached as an assistant coach in MLS, became a head coach in MLS, assistant coach with the full men's national team. So he's had this breadth of experience in such a young guy. You know, he's still a young guy. And I've known Jesse for a long time. So we're really, really excited about having him on next week, we hope. But I'll tell you a little story about Jesse. And you know, our podcast is not necessarily about the X's and O's. It's about what we think is really more important in a lot of ways. Right. And I think people like Klopp and I think Pep would agree with that. And I think Jesse will agree with that when we speak with him too. But when I was in Portland, Jesse was the head coach of New York Red Bull. And I was in Portland, and Red Bull came in, and you know, typically the visiting team will come to the home team's training center and have a training session. And you are not supposed to be present for the visiting team's training session, right? Who knows, secrets or whatever, right?
Right,
so
right.
Not supposed to be. Yeah. Well, I happened to be in the building on that day, doing some work for the academy, and I actually, it was pure happenstance that I was there. I didn't know Red Bull was going to be training there, and of course I'm good friends with a number of players on the Red Bull staff, former players that are on the Red Bull staff that came through Chicago, and friends with Jesse and whatnot. And so I decided, like, toward the end of their session, I'd pop my head out to say hi. And knowing Jesse, I knew he wouldn't have a problem with that whatsoever, right? So here we are. It's summertime in Portland. We call them bluebird days, not a cloud in the sky, you know, 75, 80 degrees, no humidity. It's just the perfect time of the year to be in Portland, right? So I pop my head outside the building, and they're coming off the field. And the first thing I notice is young kids running around, women, you know, and the players coming off the field, and everybody's smiling, everybody's happy, playing with the little kids, knocking the ball around as they come off, head towards their bus. And I'm just like, wow, what's going on here? So I grabbed some of the guys that I knew that were coming off. I go, what's going on? And he's like, well, Jesse encouraged all of us to bring our families this weekend and make a little mini vacation. This is the perfect time of year to come to Portland, and he thought it would be really good. And he invited everybody out, and I think they were planning on having a barbecue later in the day or whatever. And I was really, really impressed by that. And that intention to build a culture that Jesse has. And let me tell you, I the feeling around the group as they came off the field, and I can't recall, Tom, if they won or lost the game against Portland the next day, but I got the sense that there was something that maybe was a little bit more important happening that weekend.
Wow. Yeah. And so what's really something to think about and chew on is that here you see Jesse's success, right? What he's doing now. And it's this story that helps you see why he's successful.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You know, that you wouldn't know that. I mean, this isn't a one-time thing, I'm sure, for him. This is how he builds his culture. I mean, this is in the same way that Pep has these tenets that he builds his culture by. Jesse's doing the same thing.
Yeah. And I think my point towards, I don't remember the outcome, but my point with my point about, I think there was something bigger going on there than just the outcome the next day in the game. I think it was a groundwork that he was either laying or reinforcing that he had already laid down, right? And I think we've spoken about this before. Sometimes you give up a little to get a lot.
Right.
So maybe Jesse said, okay, 3 points this weekend. I can't recall where they were in the table. There may have been issues there that maybe the timing was good, but the moment was right to build culture.
Right. Right. I'm sure it was something intuitive that he just knew about, right? But this is
that intuition.
Yeah.
It relates to Klopp, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. That out of the box thinking.
And it's just a feel. And you know, I find it, read something about Klopp that he says, he usually only has planned his first sentence when he speaks to the team. But he's 100% confident that what he says after that will be correct.
Right. Right. That is intuition, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so, this whole thing of Klopp. Now, Klopp, he's one of my favorite coaches. I mean, I don't know him, but my boys love Liverpool. They've loved Liverpool. Christmas time, birthdays, it's Liverpool gear. I mean, they're very inspired by the story behind Liverpool and a lot of that goes on there. So when Klopp comes on the scene, he added this completely different element, right, to the coaching. But what I love about him is that you see him on the field. I mean, yes, he's passionate about everything that's happening, but he's like hugging his players, right? I mean, like smiling, and like you can tell in his interactions that he really, really cares about the players. I mean, he's not faking it. It's not because he's on TV. I mean, he's there 1,000%, but he is completely and totally engaged with them. I mean, he's coaching with a completely different mindset, I think, than you would expect from somebody at that level.
Yeah, and what's really, I mean, you use the word authentic, and it feels so authentic. And maybe you can talk to this, Tom, better than I can. But can you be authentic and intentional at the same time? Because I really feel with Klopp, he made a comment. He took over a team, and bear in mind, it took him a little bit of time to get to this point where he is right now. Right? When he first took over, it wasn't all a bed of roses. But he took over a team that was underperforming, a ton of pressure on them, the fan base, expectations.
Oh, the city of Liverpool.
City of Liverpool. So he took over this team, and the first thing he said he had to do, different than Pep, but similar, he said he had to change the mood around the whole organization. And how he did that was by being happy.
Right.
Being positive.
Right.
And that effect that it had on the players, there are other things he did, obviously, but that effect, that optimism, that positive effect that we bring and we share, it just grows. It's contagious.
Yeah. And it reminds me of a story that I read that one time during the 2018 Champions League final against Kiev, he comes in to do the game talk, the pep talk, in a pair of Cristiano Ronaldo boxers that he had bought that day, I guess, with his shirt tucked in, just to lighten the mood, just to make it more fun. But it was deeply tied into what he believed from a psychological perspective too, because the one thing that about Klopp is that he's deep with how he wants players to think about challenges and how he wants them to come across with the game. And so he's constantly doing things to shake it up, right? His smile is a part of that for sure. Yeah. I mean, these kind of fun, crazy things that he's doing, his whole idea that he says he likens his role to that of a father. And I think in answer to your question about can you be authentic and intentional at the same time, that's a good question. I don't know, but I think that where that comes from, that why it's so authentic and why it seems like he's intentional about these things, and he just gets up and he has the first sentence ready, but he doesn't know what's coming after that, is because Jurgen Klopp knows exactly who he is.
That's it. So I think if you know who you are, you can do both in a very natural way. Exactly.
I guarantee you he knows his values. They're very clear to him, right?
Yeah.
Clear purpose.
Yeah. That's why he can go in unrehearsed, unscripted, because he talks from who he is, right? And this idea of putting on Ronaldo's boxers, he's comfortable with who he is, right? He drops the F-bomb on TV. Whoa, he's comfortable with it. He apologizes for it. He makes light about it, but he's comfortable with it. That is who he is. And I think that connects you to the players. I think Firmino made a comment that they asked how he motivates you. And Firmino said, he motivates us differently every single day.
Wow. Very interesting. Yeah. He, there was this one comment as it related to the psychology that that he's creating mentality monsters.
Mm.
I love that idea. Now, and again, this is all tied up into the same thing, right? Here you have this idea that he sees his role as a father. I mean, he was actually quoted and he says, it's quite an intense philosophy, which is about man management. The closer you get to the players, the more responsible you are. And so that love he has for the players, the care he has for the players, that is how he makes them mentality monsters, right? I mean, that's part of it. It's part of the process. It's got to be for him. It's paramount. Yes, he wants them to have good people skills, teamwork above everything. That's a big thing for him. But also, it's how he is helping them to have a growth mindset, right? And that's even one of his strategies. And if people don't know about a growth mindset, a great book to read on this is the book Mindset by Dr. Carol Dweck. You can Google it. It's very popular. But one of the things that a growth mindset does is it helps you to embrace challenges, right? It helps you to see a challenge not as a threat. Oh my gosh, we might lose, but as a challenge to improve, to overcome, to come from behind. And these things he does with creating fun. I mean, he tells them all the time, even if they're going to play for the league title or whatever, he's like, enjoy the ride. This is fast. This is awesome. Enjoy it. Just enjoy the ride, no matter what happens. And he's taken the pressure off of them. I mean, it's really interesting. It's like, it's the idea of failure too. The only failure is not to have fun, not to get out there and do what we've been training to do. That's how he makes them mentality monsters.
Yeah, and this idea of mentality monsters for him is based on life experiences, right? It's what you bring with you. And like he said, he's fortunate that he has a lot of players on the current Liverpool squad that have battled through adversity. So they've been able to convince themselves of these things, that they can achieve these things. But I also like what you said, enjoy the ride. I think Klopp has this mindset that everything is an experience, and we will get something out of every experience we have, right? He drains that something out of every
experience to be gained no matter what happens.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting the way he approaches it.
Yeah, perhaps one day we'll get him on the show and we'll find out exactly what his psychology is and how this works. Really fascinating. Okay, so yeah, I love this because
can we have a beer with him? Can we have a beer?
Yeah, absolutely. A German beer.
Have a beer with him.
It'd have to be a German beer. I would think. Yeah, so here, and I think this is why this is, and hopefully, people are putting some pieces together here, but whether it's Pep Guardiola, right, that we're talking about, and what he's done to focus on culture, this idea of humility, putting the team above yourself, it's bigger than you, or hearing about Jesse Marsh and, the connection that he has. We'll hear more about him coming up, but who does that, right? Brings the families out there, the kids out there. I mean, that's somebody cut out of a different mold, doing something completely different. They're clear about their mindset. They're bringing value to people, right, in ways that are important. And Klopp, right, doing the exact same thing, making lightness out of difficult situations and really teaching psychology. And you see it. You see the authenticity of it lived out. I'm just, Larry, you've talked about a number of stories. And a number of coaches, but if you were to coach, quote unquote, some of the people who are listening out there, whether it's the coaches that from all over, and I know there's some that listen from all kinds of countries, and even players who would say, yeah, this is an important issue for me, getting my mentality right, having a winning attitude, creating winning cultures, winning mindset. What advice would you give them? Like, I mean, we've talked about a lot of ideas, but what should be some of the main things that I should start working on that would help me to create some of, I mean, you see that none of this is cookie cutter, right? So I'm not asking for step 1, step 2, step 3. Yeah. But if they were going to start exploring this, maybe they would say, I haven't done this enough. I really haven't. I focus too much on the tactical, too much on the winning, maybe too much on the ego culture. What advice would you give?
I was looking at something the other day, and it kind of made sense to me. First, we've said this before: know who you are, right? But now, as we start to think about our team, right, and working with our team, I think first, know why we matter. So that can be a lot of things why we matter.
Right.
It can be related to the game, but it can be related to people. Why we matter. Why are we important? All of us, right? Formulate that idea. Why we matter. And then take a look at who we are, right? Why we matter, who we are, and what we want to be. So why, who, what? Why we matter, who we are, and what we want to be. That's a great first step, because then you can start to put together the strategy and about how we become that.
Right. I love that. That's brilliant. It's brilliant. Yeah. And so I would give some coaching pieces on that for, like, if you say, well, how do I know who I am? Like, I mean, I know who I am, but like, what would I really, if I'm trying to reach this level to know who I am? Number one, your core values. Know your core values. What are those words, those 5 words that mean more to you than anything else? These are words that are going to be on your gravestone to say that this is who Larry Sunderland was. This is what he lived for his whole life. It's what Tom Davis lived for. Know your values. That's foundational. It's foundational in everything that I teach to every single leader. And then I think that another thing after values is to, and it's part of what you're talking about here, what we want to be, have a clear vision, right? Who are you trying to become? Not just athletically, but who are you trying to become as a person? What's important to you? Who do you want to be? I mean, you have to craft that. It's not going to happen by osmosis. It's not going to happen accidentally, right? And so clarifying your vision. And then, why we matter, why I matter, back to the Maslow's thing, I think that has to do a lot with purpose, right? And why am I here? Why am I on this earth? And you know what? Purpose is always tied into other people, always. I am here to do X, Y, and Z so that I can help or transform the life or encourage others or help people believe in themselves, whatever that happens to be. That's purpose. So that really ties into that mattering aspect.
Yeah, that idea of being connected, right? We're all here for a reason. It's not just one of us on this planet. We're all here for a reason. That idea of connection, I think, is what we're all searching for.
Yeah. Another statistic I heard is that the chances of you being here like you are, it's like 1 in 40 trillion or something. It's ridiculous. Like, I mean, which says that there is purpose, right? There is a reason. You are here for a reason. And I think that's why when people start to discover that reason through the things that we're talking about, and it takes their mindset to a whole new level, it takes their game to a whole new level. And now they're starting to climb up that pyramid, and that's where they're starting to get more peak performances. And they're not playing to perform. They're playing because of who they are, playing for what matters. Okay, let's take a couple questions here just at the end, just for a couple minutes, because we have a Facebook page. It's a private group. It's called the Heroic Mindset, and lots of interaction there. And we have people asking questions. So I want to take a couple questions here quickly that we've asked for, and we'll do a couple of these. Try to do them here at the end of every week. So we had been talking about this whole idea of players, Larry, that have this kind of, to reach the elite level, you got to be a little bit crazy, right? And we said that in a very positive way.
Yeah.
There's this mentality that these players, they just do something, they do things differently. They're working when nobody's watching. They're really hard, right? I mean, they're developing themselves in a different way, and there's kind of this edge. And so one of the questions from Herv, who's posted some really great COVID sessions on there too, for everybody on the Facebook page, he says, does brilliance and crazy lay on the edge of the same cliff? So how does that look like? Is there creating this? How do you create an exploratory environment to aid this? How do you, is there no failure in these kind of environments, only opportunity to grow? Or is there a wrong way to do this? What's a wrong environment in this brilliance crazy that can't show itself, like with artists and musicians? So, does this, this crazy and brilliance lay on the edge of the same cliff? And how do you encourage that?
That's a really interesting question.
It is.
You can get really deep with all this stuff, right? So I've been accused of being crazy a number of times, never been accused of being brilliant. So I'll do the best I can with this one. I think the idea of brilliance has to be fostered, has to be facilitated in the right environment, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there is, and when I say right is different for everyone,
Mm-hmm.
right? When you talk about this idea of brilliance and crazy, we can talk about soccer players, but I think about some musicians and stuff, and I think about Jimi Hendrix, and I think about Prince, and there's so many other just brilliant musicians, obviously, and they live on the edge of chaos.
Mm-hmm.
So what is the right petri dish for that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's different for everybody. I don't know. As we talk about soccer players and trying to develop soccer players, I think you need to be in an environment of trust and
Mm-hmm.
an environment of freedom where you can fail. You can be that crazy brilliant and try something
Mm-hmm.
that no one else tried
Mm-hmm.
over and over and over again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I think a good illustration of that, to go back to the Michael Jordan documentary, was Dennis Rodman. That you saw that's exactly what the coach did, right? I mean, he's the example of this. I mean, he was, you talk about the fine line between brilliant and crazy. I mean, and he knew it. He knew he was different than everybody else. But Phil allowed him to be that way, right? Allowed him to express that, created that environment that you're talking about.
Yeah. So how do you get the right pieces in this petri dish? Well, you got to have a relationship with the person.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You have to be connected. You have to know what things will work. So Phil Jackson knew what would work for Dennis Rodman.
Right.
Yeah, maybe he needs to go to Vegas this weekend.
Right.
Maybe he needs to go wrestle the night before a big game. Okay. And he backed it up.
Yeah. Yeah. And that would tie into exactly what we've been talking about. Even Klopp, when he was talking about, that you have to, it's about man management. You have to know these players. You believe in them. You've got to be close to them. That's part of it. And then just the last question tying into this, Sean had said on the same topic that maybe there's a balance between, the spiritual side of this and the psychological side of it. Where does that meet? Is there, kind of a line personally where that comes into play? So this idea of, being the spiritual side, the art and science, the technical, the tactical, the psychology, does the spiritual and psychologically connect to that?
Well, maybe the spiritual side, maybe we can equate that with the trust element, the belief in something greater.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I have this trust. I believe I'm here for something greater. There is something greater than me. So that frees me up, right, to test the science side, to test my abilities.
Right. Yeah. And one of the things they talk about in positive psychology, and you had kind of hit, maybe we'll do a show on this, but you were hitting about a positive environment in the culture too. I think it's really important. And that's what the positive psychology is all about. What does it take for a human being to flourish, right? To be their very best. So that's where some of these ideas come from. But one of the tenets is meaning. And it is this spiritual sense that we're talking about here. And it means that in order for me to be the very best that I can be, I have to be about something bigger than myself, right? That's the idea of meaning. It's not just about me, right? And this is also helps to dismantle an ego-driven climate, that it has to be about the team. I have to care more about the person on my left, on my right, right? This is where trust comes from, as you're saying, but it also can be a higher purpose, right? That I am spiritually connected. Of course, you see some great players who have, they're spiritually connected, Kaká and many of them, right? So that helps them to recognize that this isn't just about me, though I'm talented. It's about something much greater than me, and it's certainly about my team over me.
Yeah, I think it can be. Everybody can have their spiritual peace, regardless of what you may think that is. But I agree with you 100%, Tom. Ultimately, it is about we need to contribute to a purpose that is more than just ourselves.
That's right. I agree 100%. All right. Well, another great episode. Larry, thank you so much.
Well, thanks, Tom. I get so much out of these, man. These are awesome.
Yeah, I know. Me too. I feel like we could go forever on this. And thanks to all of you who are listening, whether you're walking your dog or in your car and your commute on your way to work, or you're just listening to this in a downtime. We appreciate you listening. We appreciate you telling your friends. We know a lot of people who said, hey, so-and-so told me about your podcast and loving it. We get those emails. We get those Facebook messages. It means a lot. So please continue to share the episode with others who are passionate about sport, who are passionate about really getting the best out of ourselves and developing these kinds of winning mindsets. But we also have some new news for you. We have an Instagram now. Who knows? Maybe we'll get Larry to do a TikTok one of these days. But you can find us on Instagram at The Heroic Mindset. Pretty easy to find. We'd love for you to join us there as well. So again, thanks so much, everyone. If you're enjoying this episode, please give us a 5-star rating. And we will be back with you next week. We've got some really incredible people lined up. Larry mentioned Jesse. Also, we have a Spanish agent who's going to be coming on. I think that's going to be fascinating to hear her. It's a woman, and she has worked with some incredible top level people you'll be blown away by. So we're excited. So we hope you have a great week, and we will talk to you soon. Thanks so much for joining us.